to today's edition of Politics 101. It's a Thursday evening and it's a wonderful evening in Guyana, wherever you are in Guyana, whether you're in Demerara, in Berbice, in Essequibo, whether you're in the city, whether you're in the villages, whether you're in the Greater Caribbean or in the diaspora in North America, in Europe, in Africa. Welcome to Politics 101. I'm coming to you from Guyana. I am just getting back from a funeral in Buxton. And of course, I was there mourning with one of the families that just lost a loved one. And the Buxtonians send their regards. I told them a few minutes ago that I've got to go because I have a program tonight that is dealing with a subject that is of most importance to them and to all Guyanese. And this is the question of an educational cash grant. Now, we know that the government of Guyana is giving out this $19,000. That is saying it's because we care, we are giving you $19,000. And they calling it an educational cash grant. Now, there are two things that I would like to take issue with. One is because we care. If you care, you don't give the working people of your country $19,000. And we don't know if it's per month. We know it's not per month. If it's per term, we don't know whether it's per term. But $19,000 in a time when we are raking in millions and millions of dollars from oil revenue, giving the working peoples of this country $19,000 is an insult to them. If you care about people, you don't give them $19,000. It comes up to what they say, 2.3 billion or something like that. When you have a budget of 260 something billion and you're bailing out billions to your people. You can't tell me if you're giving ordinary people $19,000 because you care. So something is wrong with that. And then you're calling it an education grant. Now, I have been told by people who know about education, and I have to say one of my guests tonight called me and schooled me on education. That education is not just about books and pencils and pens. It's also about nutrition. It's also about sanitation in schools. It's also about transportation to school. It's also about food. It is also about in the era of technology, it's also about technology at the disposal, not just of students in schools, but our students at home. So I decided that tonight I want to talk about cash grants as a policy issue, not just sharing out money to people. You share out a $19,000 a day. That's not a policy. I want to talk about cash grants as a policy. And then I want to link that cash grants policy to the question of education. Because as I said just now, I've been schooled that education is not just the teacher in the school with a blackboard and some books and so on. It's much more than that. Much more than that. Much more than that. So tonight's topic, towards a comprehensive education cash grant, is what we're going to talk about. Now, this program is Big People program. And when I say big people, I don't mean big people in age. about big people in terms of maturity in conversation. Maturity in conversation. On Tuesday, we had the General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union, Sister Coretta MacDonald, on, and she gave the perspective of the Teachers Union on this issue. Kidaki Amsterdam was also on, and he contributed immensely to that discussion. Tonight, we want to take it to another level. As I said, we want to talk about this issue of cash grants. Is it doling out money to people? Or is it a matter of policy where you take a percentage of the earnings of the country and let the people decide how they want to do that? And then we want to talk about what is an educational cash grant. Is it the narrow conception of what education is, or is it the broad conception of what education is? Now, over the last couple of weeks, I've been moving around to different communities and listening to people as part of a WPA delegation going into communities. And one of the things I've been hearing, one of the things we have been hearing as we move from community to community, this past yesterday, we were in Golden Grove. We are coming to Victorian Sunday. One of the things we've been hearing is whether people who did not vote for the government should accept these grants that the government is providing, or should they reject those grants? We've been hearing the cries of the people that things are bad. They don't support the government. They don't believe the grants that have been given for COVID-19 and for education are given in the spirit that it ought to be given. But the central question they're asking, what do they do? Should they reject those grants? What is our position on the issue of cash grants? It is now a big thing around the world, very big thing around the world, where governments are giving their citizens monies in a direct way. I say direct because policies can either be indirect. If I build good roads in your community, that would indirectly benefit transportation. And if you have better transportation, then it's easier to get things done. That's indirect. Or direct, which is we give you the money and you decide what to do with it. Those of us who are political people, we don't know where the roof is leaking. We don't know whether the young lady who has a stand at the corner of the road, and if she were to get $300,000, she could move from just a stand at the corner of the road to thrive in business. We don't know that. And we are not always able to control for that. So all of these questions I want to put to two friends of this program. I say friends of the program because they've been on before. And like I said, this is a big people program. Big people not in terms of age, but in terms of dealing with the issues in a matured way. You can be 18 and matured. You can be 48 and you're still immature. So when I talk about big people program, I talk about maturity, political maturity, social maturity. Tonight I have as guest Richard Van West Charles, who called me and schooled me on what a real education cash grant is about. And when I was finished talking to Richard, I was thinking about who else would be able to bring to bear on this subject common sense. And I thought about Cathy Hughes, former Minister of Government. She's into marketing and advertising. She was a minister. When you go in your community today and you have these, what they call the hubs, the Wi-Fi hubs, you ought to remember Cathy Hughes. I thought she could bring to bear on this discussion that larger perspective that Politics 101 has become known for. So that's what we will be talking about tonight. A comprehensive education grant for our people. Is the PPP prostituting the idea of a cash grant? Are they using it in narrow ways to satisfy narrow political objectives? What is a real cash grant? This program is a friend of cash grants. I want to say that from up front. I'm a member of the Working People's Alliance. 2018, Professor Clive Thomas went to Buxton and introduced the term to Guyanese. We call it cash transfers. 2018, August, emancipation. And so therefore, I am a friend of cash grants, and our program is a friend of cash grants. And I told the Buxtonians tonight, as I left there, that I'm going to be discussing cash grants tonight and who my guests would be. And they say, we Guyanese, we got repass now. After the funeral, you go and you hang out. But they take out the phone and they show me, they say, well, Dr. Hines. And they don't call me Dr. Hines, it's Boston. I won't tell you what they call me. But they said, we got the phone. So here we are tonight. I've chatted for a few minutes to give you time to congregate. So let me introduce my guest tonight, Richard Van West Charles. No introduction. He's been here before. Cathy Hughes, no introduction. She's been here before. Cathy, I'm going to start with you because you haven't been here in a long time. Do you believe this cash grant, cash transfer, is a good policy as far as distribution of wealth to ordinary people is concerned?
Thanks for having me, David. Good to see my colleague. I absolutely agree and believe that cash grants are a positive thing in terms of a positive mechanism for us to begin to start redistributing wealth in communities. I think the nonsense that we hear sometimes in Guyana about people squandering it, that is by far an exception and not the rule. Most families, most women, as you know, who are the ones that quite often deal with the household, a child's education. I'm not saying that men don't, but most women, most parents, most adults will put that monies to the best use that they can put it to. And I think sometimes governments are far too distant from the realities of what people need in their homes And individuals are better in a position to know exactly what they need at any point in time. So I'm all for cash grants.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And I wish to remind the audience when the WPA came out with the cash grants initiative in 2018, the AFC as a party embraced that initiative.
Yeah.
Richard, let me bring you in here. What are your thoughts, your general thoughts on cash grants, cash transfers as a policy in terms of redistribution of resources to ordinary people?
My experience with it is that you need to have confidence in families to be able to spend money in relation to their needs. You are going to have a very, very small percentage of families who are going to misallocate resources. But in the main, I think we have to have the faith and confidence in families to be able to arrive at their own priorities and look at the needs of their families, their children, etc. So I have no difficulty with that. And especially in light of a situation where you have so many people that the basket that is required for good nutrition, etc., what they're earning is not adequate. And so you need that cash transfer to buffer and to impact their own sustainability. So I think, yes, it's required. You look at Canada and some other countries where you have what is called a baby bonus to assist in the welfare of kids, etc. And this is across the board. It's not looking at one set of people, one set of children. It's across the board, realizing that people need to have some buffer in dealing with some real priorities.
Thank you very much. And I let me recognize Oswin from Phoenix, Arizona, who has thrown his full support behind this issue. John C. Paul is someone who I know well. I've worked with him in Coffee 250. Is also expressing confidence in cash transfer and cash grants as a policy issue. Richard, let me move to you because you called me.
Oh, may I make one point?
Yes, go ahead.
However, I think the way that the method being used by Guyana is not the best methods of accountability. Of having people walk around with a lot of cash and giving it out in the way that they are giving it out. You can have a lot of misallocation and a lot of wrong application of the grant. So there must be better ways and means by which people can access the grants.
Right, and I'm coming to that with you. Critique, and this is for both you and Kathy. Both of you have expressed confidence in cash grants as a policy in terms of distribution of national wealth and national resource. I want you all to critique the PPP's approach to cash grants. What is wrong with what the PPP is doing as far as this cash grant is concerned? And I'll start with you.
Well, I think you remember all of this is within the context of COVID. So the cash grants emerged as a result of COVID. First, it was the 25,000. Yes, and then this aspect of the education cash grants. Now, because of COVID, I think it's a misnomer. It should be more or less a family cash grant. And the point you raised, we are not too sure of the periodicity of it and the frequency of it. But for education in relation to COVID, it requires much more. One, there is a safe environment in which the children must learn in relation to water and sanitation. So that requires a separate investment. Then we all know, because of COVID, the issue of nutrition for the children in schools. In some schools, there is some nutrition, but not in all schools. Then the issue of the transportation to schools. When you look at transportation in Guyana and the school children, going by the minibuses is all crowded. And therefore, one needs to look at how that is organized, and also maybe even the school hours in terms of the issue of transportation, nutrition, and the safe environment. And of course, the vaccination with respect to looking at it. Now, separate and apart, families will need, because we all know in most countries, as a result of COVID, the economies have been hit and the cost of living has increased. So the public servants have not had an increase in their wages, and all across. So looking at the minimum wage, it has to be adjusted. But I think that there is a need for, in addition to the investment in schools, a cash grant with a bit more frequency to allow families to buffer the impact of the cost of living rise as a result of COVID.
Thanks, and I'll come back to you because I would want you to flesh that out for me. But Kathy, I'm posing the same question to you. For you to critique the PPP's approach to this cash grant issue. Is it inadequate? Is it political gimmickry? What?
So you actually touched on my first criticism, which is that I do not think it is adequate at all. I want to start off by saying that I know you posed the question as to whether, not a question, but a concept, as to whether we should be accepting it. And I'd like to say to every single Guyanese, this is taxpayers' money. You have a right to collect it. So you collect it. But in the general concept of the grant, I want to say that it is not sufficient. And there are a couple of things. I don't want to repeat the things that were said before by Richard, but I want to just give you a quick synopsis. That $19,000 works out to be about $1,500 a month. So you're asking a family to literally spend $1,583 exactly per child per month. And what is the reality of education today, which we know they claim, the PPP claims they care about, and this grant is supposed to address? And that is education, learning in a time of COVID. Now, the reality is that schools have been closed for more than a year and a half now. We're going on 2 years soon. And the reality is that in Guyana today, the way education is structured, if you have money, if your parents have the good fortune to have internet at home, if they have the good fortune to be in a position to give each of their children a device, because it's not just one device. Imagine a household that has maybe 3 children. First of all, you have to have the internet to the home. You have to have a device for each child. And then, of course, you have to have a learning environment that they can sit down and go online. So it means a little corner in the house, a little room, a little table, a little desk. And the reality is, with online learning, you probably need somebody at home to be able to supervise. So these are extremely difficult things that must be provided for the learning experience to be successful. Now, about 6 weeks ago, I contacted both of the major telephone companies because I had been asked a very pertinent question. And that was, has the government engaged the telephone companies to provide specific internet plans for children, for school children, for students? And in speaking to both of those companies, and I will tell you it was 6 weeks ago, but my quick checks yesterday showed that it hadn't really changed. The government has not contracted the telephone companies to provide a subsidized internet package for children. So parents would have to be paying for an internet package that costs about, one provider provides it at 5,400, the other provider provides it at $5,789. That's the cheapest internet package. So what you're saying is that the 19,000 cannot even pay, that 1,500 could not even pay for the internet package that home needs to have for that month. It certainly could not pay for a device. So what we're really doing is not seriously dealing with the issue of learning. And therefore, you have to question if they're serious about really providing something to enhance children's learning. The other criticism, of course, is that there's nothing in the 19,000 that says it must be spent on the child and the child's education. So you're taking the 19,000. As Richard said, persons have not in the public sector have not had an increase in their salaries. Cost of living has gone up in some products and some basic necessities over 100%. So you know that people are working with less money, and you know that 19,000, the reality is, could go to everything else except education for a child.
Thank you, Kathy. Go ahead.
I was going to say I have a couple other points to make, but we could make it, later down.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And Richard, I'm coming to Kathy was quite emphatic. They give you $19,000 because it's taxpayers' money. Do you stand on that?
Say again, I didn't hear that.
Kathy said that they're giving you $19,000. She's critiqued it as being woefully inadequate. No, but she's saying to people out there, take it.
I agree with Kathy. In terms of the cost of internet, if they had studied the program properly, and if they were clear that this is a basic platform that is required for children, then that negotiation would have occurred between the Ministry of Education and the internet providers for children across the country, so that they can have access for the learning. So that is one, and which means that they never really considered that aspect of learning as part of the grant, or else that it wouldn't be done. Secondly, the cost of the uniform material would have increased. And in the light of COVID, what one would have seen is, I would have thought that they would have removed the VAT and made the importation of the material for the uniforms duty-free, because it's 170,000, and the duties collected on the uniform material is negligible. So they should have made that duty-free, and for specific suppliers, and cap the cost for the uniform material, so that the parents are very, very clear in terms of how much they have to pay for the material. And secondly, look at the cost of the production of the material, the uniforms, and look at those costs to be sure that the families are not being charged exorbitant prices for the uniforms. So those are things that it signals to anyone that the ministry did not really think this thing through, and was basically using the cash grant, quote unquote, as a means of giving, and the we care really speaks to the issue of some degree of deception in terms of the use of the cash grant. Because the cash grant needs to be clear in terms of what are the components. What do you expect families to spend this money on?
Mhm.
Do you expect them to spend money on the internet? Do you expect on books? Do you expect on materials, etc.? So let us put those things out on the table so that people are clear what you expect. Because when you break it down, as Kathy says, $1,500 per month is neither here nor there
Yeah.
with respect to assisting a family with a child, much less 3 or 4 children. And then the cost of living, the cost of food has increased tremendously. So what are we really saying? And this type of thing, as you say, David, with all the resources that are coming in, at least our children should be having the priority, right? And where some of these children are living are a challenge. And I said to you, in terms of COVID, the infrastructure in schools, really, I understand they just got a loan, but that has to be done in a way that is properly organized and there is good monitoring and accountability. Because what we found was a lot of contracts being given to people who haven't got the capacity to ensure that proper plumbing is done in these schools and the access to water and sanitation. So I would hope that they would step back and understand that these children are a priority. The parents need some more help than what they're talking about. Ensure the platforms by which the children have to access information is. I honestly believe it should be free. I think the children, if with the online learning and so forth that is required, because the parents cannot afford, if they have 3 kids in as Kathy pointed out, then they have to pay for the internet. And they have to have a robust platform for the children to be able to access information and learn. So clearly, I don't think to be kind, it really has to have a rethink. But whatever they're getting now, parents should take.
Yes, and I'm glad that both of you have stressed that. You know, because people often think about opposition have to have a robust opposition to oppose. But as opposition, we should also propose.
Absolutely.
I'm hearing from you here tonight is that, look, these people are talking about a cash grant for education. Haven't thought through education, holistic terms. In holistic terms, they haven't thought through the concept of what a cash grant is aimed to do. And we, opposition, AFC, PNC, WPA, you all notice that? AFC, PNC, WPA. We are talking tonight as people who have thought through this thing. And we are saying to the government, you haven't thought this thing through. You haven't thought this thing through.
Correct.
And because you haven't done that, this is not a real education cash grant. We're going to take a short break. We're going to do a PSA. And when we come back, we are going to continue this opposition, not opposing, but proposing.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
Thank you very much, and thanks to those of you who have contributed. Thank you very much. And those of you who intend to contribute, thank you in advance. Kathy, I'm coming to you. because we don't, it doesn't seem as though our children are going to go back to the classroom in a normal situation anytime soon. And so technology becomes an important component of education. I want you to talk to us about how technology has become this important component of learning, and what you have begun to do when you are minister, and what ought to be done right now.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you made the point, because the opposition is not just about opposing. That's really breaking our role down into a very simplistic way. And if people took the time to listen to what we say, then we will know that there are a lot of constructive suggestions and recommendations. And I'm certainly going to make a few in a moment. The first thing I want to say is that technology is extremely important, David. And in fact, just about 5 years ago, the Secretary General of the United Nations actually spoke of access to technology and technology as a human right. And of course, most people will know, let me remind you, that the Sustainable Development Goal number 7 talks about access to the internet and technology as a human right. So what we're saying is not a luxury. In today's world, you need, in a globalized world, you need to have access to technology and to the internet. And that's precisely why the APNU AFC administration went to great lengths to ensure that access to technology and to the internet was a right and therefore paid for by the government. And as I said to you, there is a whole digital divide. We're seeing it now, because let me repeat, if you have money, your child is going to learn. If you do not have money, then your child would be out of learning. And I would like to say that just today, this morning, I spent 4 hours in a community. I don't want to name the community, but in Georgetown. I'm looking at 24 young children between the ages of 5 to 8 years old, and none of those children have had access to learning since March of last year when school closed. None of them. And that's a frightening thought. I met 8-year-old children that cannot write their names. This is a very serious issue. So when we talk about gaps in terms of, and the relation to income levels, whether you have money, whether your child is going to go to a good school, and if they don't go to a good school, they get left behind. We have to change that. And that is why we put free internet access in over 150 schools, why we created over 173 ICT hubs in communities. Now, what I expected and what I still would like to see is we did 173 in 2 years of the Ministry of Public Telecommunications. I want to see the PPP do not 173. I want to see in the next year or 2 years, they do 200, 400. I want them to publicly say that, guess what? They did more than APNU AFC in terms of technology. But what have they actually done? In many locations, there's been no program to use the existing internet in those locations and ask communities to come up with their own mechanism. Doing social distancing, making sure the environment is safe for children, but at least giving them access in a coordinated way to the internet, so at least somebody can learn. Instead, in what we're finding, I've got about 6 reports of locations where the internet has been deliberately switched off and the government is no longer paying for the internet. I'm glad that there's some places still having access to the internet. I am disappointed that the first set of people that were fired were a group of young people located throughout the hinterland and in all the communities, all the regions, that were supervising the maintenance of these ICT hubs and also the internet in schools. So we fired 57 people that were deliberately making sure the equipment was still on and still working. That makes no sense. So at a time when you want people to use the internet, you're actually refusing to use the great platform that you had and are now refusing to give people the opportunity to get free internet access. What I want to do is to mention briefly some of the solutions, as you say, to propose a solution, which I try to do each time. In other parts of the world, the government pays for that internet package. They pay the telephone company to design an internet package, which could be for certain age groups between 9 and 12 in the morning. The package is done in such a way that the students can only access learning institutions. So you're blocking out access to movie sites, pornography, all those different things. Technology allows you to protect against that. Mm-hmm. So imagine you can have a certain age group at a certain time. They get a package for a certain amount of hours, so they have automatic access. If they do not have a device, that's the next thing that governments have the leeway to do. You buy a portable internet access and you give it to communities, or you give it to children in remote areas. And again, it only comes on at a certain time of day, and it only allows them access to certain sites. That is how in the rural US communities, especially in the indigenous Indian communities and some of the poor rural communities of North America, they have a device and a child sits in the corner, switches it on, and has internet access. The technology is there to allow us to provide all those solutions. And when we have over 400 million US dollars in a sovereign wealth fund right there, some of that money could be used today to make sure that a child in Cross Street, a child in Old Boys Town, Sophia, in the Rupununi, anywhere it is, wherever, that doesn't have access, the government provides a platform for them to continue to learn.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And I'm so glad for that intervention. Our people have to fight. And we have to fight by pushing back against what is happening in our country. What is happening in our country is not simply PPP versus PNC or AFC or WPA or whomever. What is happening in our country is really a fight for how our people are going to benefit from the increased resources that are coming our way. At the end of the day, it boils down to that. We have to fight on all fronts. And in some areas, we fight by criticizing what is happening. In other areas, we fight by showing that we have superior proposals. That is important, because the conception of us is that we ought to oppose. And we are saying we are in opposition that as ideas, and ideas that can work. And we are not saying wait until we come back to government for our people to benefit from what Guyana has to offer. We want them to benefit now. We want them to benefit now. Kathy, I've been moving around in the last couple of weeks. I've been hearing from communities that some of those hubs have been turned off. And what I've been saying to people, call in and report to us so that we know. Become citizen reporters. Tell us what is happening. In some instances, they have not turned off the hubs. They have knocked off the people who have been working as community workers to keep the hubs going. And the point you're making there, that they are children 5 to 8 years old, because of economic circumstances, who do not have access to internet and the technology, it means they are left out of the learning process. And I think that's what we have got to talk about. Let me move to Richard, because Richard, you introduced the notion of nutrition. And I want you to talk about the relationship between food and nutrition and education.
Right. Before I get to that, David, I just wanted to follow on something that Kathy said, if I may. The government has to understand where is the role of knowledge and access to knowledge in terms of economic development. When you look at Europe and the first world, it is knowledge as a driver that for economic development. So if we understand that, then the platform, the enabler, is the technology. Now, what has happened is that I don't think there is a proper understanding. If you look at in terms of the number of schools that have access to science teachers, many schools don't write science subjects. Now, if they understood very carefully that with the technology access, that you can have many, many more kids doing sciences and not moving in a way that we are stratifying the careers of kids from different areas because of a lack of access to teachers in certain subjects. So if you took, for example, in Georgetown, in Wilford Avenue, you have Queen's College, you have Tutorial, you have Richard Ishmael, you have St. Joseph's, you have North Georgetown, etc. Those are about five secondary schools. They're all writing the same curriculum with respect to CXC and CAPE. And yet, in some instances, they may be short of teachers. So you may have teachers at QC, but they're not available to the St. Joseph students or not available to the North Georgetown students. But with the technology and robust technology, those children can have access from North Georgetown to the same quality of education that the students at QC may have. And so you begin to level the playing field in terms of access and equity in education. So that's one of the first important things. With respect to nutrition, there is evidence out of the Tropical Research Unit in Jamaica, done by a nutritionist, Dr. Sally McGregor and others, which showed very clearly that the importance of nutrition is linked to the learning. Children cannot come to school hungry and you expect them to learn. So nutrition is very, very important. And the quality of the nutrition, when I was head of the WHO office in Bahamas, for example, one of the things that attracted us to look at what children were coming with, even in the Bahamas, a lot of what they were coming with in the lunch kits was not satisfactory for the nutrition input for learning. So these things are very, very important. And again, with 35% of our country in poverty, we need to ensure that the kids coming from those communities have access to good nutrition, have access to the technology to enable them to learn. Many kids who are behind, the evidence is there that they can leapfrog their development with access to technology. They can really leapfrog grades with access to technology and good nutrition. So it really is important that the Ministry of Education understands these issues and they can understand that it is not opposition for opposition's sake, but it's trying to ensure that the quality of life and the access of that to kids and their families is at a better level than what is being presented, because it requires more than the $19,000 in terms of looking at the two components: access to the technology and access to nutrition and the books. So I think, David, if they're listening, I hope they can look at that carefully, because when I first returned to Guyana after my retirement from PAHO, I remember looking at schools on the coast and some schools in Buxton, and those schools, the children were not writing any science subjects at all because there were no science teachers. And I also remember I saw a parent-teacher association from Anna Regina asking for help for science teachers. And I reached out to some other folks and was trying to really connect science teachers from North America into Guyana to teach science. But then we got access to somebody here. But that's the other aspect. You have teachers in the diaspora. Once we have the technology, teachers who are retired, teachers who are in voluntary groups, voluntary associations, can buffer the learning program here in Guyana using the technology and help in terms of improving access to knowledge and moving children apace. Even at the Technical Institute, you can have access to different programs at a technical level, and those children in the institute can have access to them. So it just shows that if we are thinking clearly about the access to knowledge, then there should be no hesitation in terms of buffering the cost. Now, in terms of technology access and looking at the cash grant in a different way.
Thank you very much, Richard. So here we are tonight talking about this grant issue. We have established one, that they're giving you this grant. We do not want to call it an education grant because it's not an education grant. At best, Richard calls it a child's grant, all right? A children's grant. And we're saying to you, don't reject it, take it, because it's taxpayers' money that is coming to you. And in this hard guava season, I happen to go into the market, and I know what's happening there in the market. I see what's the cost of and I know if you get $19,000 is the market you go in, right? And I look at the cost of items. So we've established that. We've established that technology, whether it's in the era of COVID or post-COVID, technology is important for education. You can't escape that. And they've established that if you're going to talk about an education grant, then technology has to be an important part of that. Secondly, we have established that nutrition is important. What the mighty Sparrow say? You can't make love on hungry belly, but you can learn on hungry belly. Right? So food and nutrition become important to this whole issue of education. Kathy, I'm coming to you. Is there any other component apart from technology, food, and nutrition that you want to introduce into this conversation of a comprehensive education cash grant?
Well, I don't know if I mentioned devices, but and I know that is a technological, piece of equipment, but a device is very, very important also, and we didn't really mention that. And I just wanted to say that, we did have a program that by 2021, all the children in Guyana should have been issued a tablet. And I'm talking about a higher level tablet that they would have been able to assist with their learning. And it's something that I think the government, again, we're talking about ensuring that children have access. There are lots of other things. We mentioned the fact that children in a learning environment still need to have support. And therefore, the reality is, who is it? Is it a grandmother, an aunt, a guardian, a mother, a father that's actually going to be there some of the time? Learning online and sitting down for 4 or 5 hours in front of screen is not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing for teachers. The teachers have to be trained to be able to make that kind of learning interesting. They have to be trained to still connect with their classes and their students on an individual basis. And of course, some provision needs to be put in place to ensure that within families themselves, there's somebody that is there. The reality is that if you have in a country like Ghana, where a lot of the women still are the ones that look after the education and health of the children, then we have a lot of women that are in single parent households. We have a lot of them. The only jobs that they've been able to get is security work. So who is actually with that child when they're getting frustrated and maybe not hearing the teacher too well, got homework to do? That support must be there. And I don't think there's been any kind of analysis to that. I'm disappointed that there's so many people, so many families recently, and I can say which communities, off the air, that have not even been able to access the workbooks.
Yeah.
That a parent will tell you, I say, make sure you put your children to sit down in the morning. When they wake up in the morning, make them bathe and dress as if they're going to school.
The school.
Let
Yeah.
their mind start to think, this time is the time I got to pick up my tables, I got to do schoolwork. Not just a free for all August holiday that runs into 2 years of holidays, And they will tell you that just getting the bus fare to go and pick up the workbook, and some of them have gone and then been told, we don't have any workbooks at this point in time. I had a teacher that went a couple of days ago and there were no workbooks. She's going to go back. So that kind of thing for a family that already short of money, you're asking them, first of all, to go pick it up, do the homework, and carry it back for it to be graded. The system is not working. The system is not working.
Yes. Happy, somebody saying here, I think this lady should run for the presidency. She's more informed than many. That's the kind of that we get here on this program, because what we bring is information. And I like Guyanese, when they hear sense, why she can really express herself fully. We know when they say that, what they mean is that you're touching the heart, Your husband, like Bob Marley, every man's chest, it beats the heart, And often we don't connect to the heart, right? But it seems as though we're doing that tonight. Richard, any other thing that you think is important as we talk about this company?
Well, let me say to you, David, in the 80s, there was a program in schools called Healthy Schools, which both WHO and UNICEF supported, and UNESCO actually. And you're really looking at your kids in the schools with a different set of components. One certainly is the cognitive, but it's the issue of access to water and sanitation, the nutrition side, etc. And then, so you look at kids and who are falling behind, that there is a system by which they are evaluated. So Kathy's example of the kids who can't read at age 8, that should not have happened.
Yeah.
It should not have happened in our schools if there was a program by which the remedial system is working and there is a proper assessment. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the approach to remedial work for children who have fallen behind. It's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
And I do not think that they're achieving, and we are doing our children any good by the way those programs are conducted. But if we mainstream technology, Kathy will say, there are so many other programs that are available on the internet for learning. You know of the Aga Khan Foundation. And they have a series of programs for different grades, different levels. And children can access them once they have access on the internet. So it can help teachers. Teachers can also use it to assign, to help children to learn. But the other issue is transportation in terms of how children are getting to school. We know in the rural environment, children, we spoke about this also, David, in the hinterland, children have got to walk hours upon hours to get to school in Region 9, for example. Now, certainly, as a country with resources emerging, we should be able to address those things in short order so that the children can get to school fast, the nutrition is there, access to the technology, and they can learn, and we have better citizens emerging using knowledge in a way to create wealth for themselves and the families. Because once the children learn and there is that access, you can see how it can be used for the family to create wealth also. If they were doing other things, if they have, they're doing, as in the hinterland environments, they have small businesses, etc. To put things on the internet, etc., to create more wealth for their family. So we have to see technology in a different way and how we create networks to access knowledge. It's a fantastic leveler and lends to itself for economic development, access to technology. So in terms of, if we're talking about education and the grants can be meaningfully applied, the family can be clear how they're accessing, and then you have the children grants as a separate issue, which allows the family to earn additional money more than the 1,500 per month.
Thank you very much. And if you're just tuning in, we are talking about this Education Week. The discussion is spurred by this so-called education cash grant that the PPP has rolled out because we care. And we are looking at that tonight, and we are bringing to bear the other perspective, which goes beyond gimmickry, which goes beyond gimmickry, which goes beyond political soundbites. And we are talking here about a policy of education and how that policy can take advantage of the increased wealth that is coming our way. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to get into some rapid questions with our guests, Kathy Hughes and Richard Van Westchild.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
Thank you and welcome back to Politics 101. And remember, this program is coming to you on the platform of CAMS TV. CAMS TV, we have great programming on CAMS TV. In the morning, we have the Buxtonian Morning Time with Kidaki Amsterdam. And of course, in the evenings, we have Politics 101. I want to recognize Claire Forbes, who was a veteran of these programs, or an author, my friend out of California, Donna Joseph, June Peters, and of course, Cheryl Glenn, who is always with us. Desiree Simmons, she raised the question of whether the government actually worked out a criteria for this grant. Desiree, if you've been, as you have been listening to our guest tonight, clearly there were no criteria for this cash grant. Obviously, it's something they think is a good gimmick. They think that, look, we can say we spend $3.2 billion on education, on cash grants, but we know the budget was $380-something billion, right? And we know that they're spending $1 billion on other sectors of the society. I make no apologies that our bias on this program is for the working people, the ordinary people, the toilers. All of us here in this program, whether it's with Kathy, myself, we are where we are because of the toil, the sacrifice of working people, tangible and intangible ways. They've created us. And as Walter Rodney would say, we have a responsibility to advocate for them and to ensure that when wealth comes to the country, that they have their fair share of it. Kathy, there is the big debate about whether this money should be given to just children in the private schools, the public schools, and we should leave out the private schools. Where do you come down on that?
I think as a policy, if you're developing the policy, then it has to be for every single child. I know of quite a few women who give everything they have to just make sure that their child can continue to go to that private school, because the school in the vicinity to which they live does not have the infrastructure, does not have the level of teachers. So that woman or that man is putting everything they can into ensuring that child has that opportunity. And to assume, therefore, that at private schools, it's only rich people children is a fallacy. So I think it has to be given to all Guyanese children. And this is where, as you say, the fact that there's a criteria, and no criteria that we are aware of, opens it out for it to be abused in several ways. I keep saying we had so many problems with the COVID cash grant, so many reports of persons not being able to collect their monies. Who was given a pink slip, who wasn't given a pink slip. And to date, I have not seen a huge media campaign that says, if you did not collect your COVID cash grant, come to this location at this time and we will make sure you get it. And therefore, we had a very subjective way of distributing it. And therefore, we ended up with loads of individuals feeling that they were deliberately discriminated against in terms of the distribution of that grant. And again, not enough was done in a practical way to ensure that that perception is not reality. Because even if people perceive that there was some unfairness, then it is for the government to prove that no, that is not the case.
Yes.
And so we need an approach to this grant that says exactly, is it for every single child in every family? Where do they collect it? How is it being collected? Is it still somebody that's going to walk down a street and decide, oh, you know what? I ain't really like her because I got a story with the family, so I can keep walking. Those are the real criticisms that have been made about the distribution system. Why in this day and age we cannot send the money in some other way? Mobile money, everybody got a telephone. Almost everybody in Guyana, I think the penetration rate is something like 98%. And we actually have some individuals with two. Can we work out the household concept? How many children, and send it straight to a phone? Or do we have them go maybe when they're collecting the pension, they're collecting at the same time? But there are loads of innovative ways, especially ways that use technology for us to ensure a safe distribution of these monies.
Thank you, Kathy, and I'm very glad you raised that. The WPA, we were in Golden Grove a couple of days ago, and there was one man there who said he has not received his COVID-19 grant. And we said to the audience, look, you all got to get to work. You all need to scour this community and come up with a list of people who have not received their grants and get them to all the political parties. Send them to the PNC, to the AFC, to the WPA. So we have a list of people who have been discriminated against. You see? So we can present. So I'm so glad you raised that. Because often we think about political work as just election work, and not the kind of work that people can do in their communities. We in Georgetown or in the political parties don't always know what's happening on the ground. Right? We hear there's discrimination, but there is the evidence. You in the communities, that's your responsibility. Collect the evidence, send it to us. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, David, I was going to say that I know just from my personal interaction with several communities on the outreaches that we're going through, and I have names of 73. I have 73 persons already. Their names, their phone numbers, and everything. And APNU, the leader of the opposition's office, actually has an individual there that is collecting that information. So I would love to use the program to say to persons, please, if you call and just say what it is and give your name and a number, and we can always get back, in terms of the specifics. Because some people weren't given a pink slip. Some people were given that confusion. And the fact that there's confusion is a problem, right?
Yes.
And you have to wonder if it's deliberate. If we could sell the people that you must go and buy a Coke or you must go and buy a Pepsi, why can't we sell to persons how you're going to collect your money?
Yes.
Simple. Simple.
Wonderful. So there you have it. If please in your communities get those names of people, send them to us. As we hear now, there's somebody in the office of the leader of the opposition who's dealing with this matter. Send it to the PNC, send it to the WPA, send it to the AFC, and we will make sure that action is taken. That's your homework. Go ahead.
But
David, sorry, just quickly to say that I'm also on Facebook. And so, again, if persons just hit us up on Facebook with the information in a messenger message, this is the way we do something about it.
But I want to say, David, look.
Yes.
At our level in a country like ours, we have to force these government agencies to have systems that are much more efficient in the distribution of resources. The way this has been conducted is fraught with an access to corruption, right? And no accountability. It's not that we do not have the figures. For each of these communities, we have data, how many households exist. So why is it that systems cannot be put in place that are efficient enough to distribute resources. Because we don't want it that way, and we want to give the issue of we care and use it for political reasons.
Yes.
That is it.
Yes, we were on the quarantine, Richard and Kathy. And what they're telling us on the quarantine is that they come to certain communities, they stop, and they skip, and they go to other communities. And when they are pressured to go into these communities, and they wanted to skip, they would go along the main road and distribute the resources on the main road. So if you live into a street, they don't cater for you. And so more than half of the communities have not received these resources.
Let me make this point. With the flooding that has taken place, I have no doubt that we need grants for especially farmers who have lost their livestock, etc., etc. That's their livelihood. So we need to look. But because we haven't got systems, because we're tending to use this partisanship system and trying to gain support, political support through using government's resources, it's nonsense. And therefore, we have to force, and one of the things we have to provide the methodology to them, to use this methodology, because this is the only way that you're going to have equity in the distribution of resources. And I think I'm sorry that the University of Guyana is not looking at some of these things, because they should be looking at it from the point of view and research of some of the distributive systems that we can have and put in place to achieve equitable distribution. These are things that we shouldn't be the way we are carrying on, people walking around with money in their bags and then deciding I go on the front street and I go on the back street. Nonsense.
And you know, I'm glad Richard mentioned the flood situation, because 2 Sundays ago, I spent the whole day in Region 5 in quite a few of the communities there.
Yeah.
And again, this is a modus operandi. This is the way the PPP operates, and we just have to be very blunt and honest and make people aware of it. I met women and men, citizens in communities, who had lost cattle, lost bees, lost 11 goats, lost chickens. And you know, it was absolutely sad. Up to now, every single Guyanese doesn't have a clear concept of what is the claims program that is in place. So I said to that lady, to one of the ladies with the chickens, I said, okay, have they come to you to tell you how you're going to get some refund, some assistance? Because if she's lost 55 chickens and it's in a flooded area, how is she getting the money in these times to buy back the chickens, to clean out the pens, to raise the pens, to maybe put some concrete to prevent it from flooding the next time? All those are key issues. And yet there's absolutely no information. No flyer was dropped off to say, if you're going to claim, you must take a picture of the dead chicken so we know that you didn't really make this up and you ain't scamming us or whatever. So when I said to a few of them, did you take pictures? One lady was very upset. She said, you know, Kathy, to tell you the truth, I never thought of that. And you know where that's going to head. So because when she goes and says she lost 55 chickens, she doesn't have anything to prove. And the system is automatically going to assume that she made it up, she lying, she just running, trying to scam the government of money for 55 chickens. It is stupid. It is stupid. And we've done nothing to put a proper system in place.
Right. And just so you know, I know Kathy was in Region 5 2 Sundays ago, because we in the WFA, we were coming from Region 6. And we stopped to eat in Region 5. And they said, Kathy, Emraj, and David left it 10 minutes ago. Right? So we walking, right?
Yes.
The communities. And when we come into the communities, what we want is the information. The information that you all have there so that we're better able to articulate it. Richard, where you stand on the private school, public school thing?
No, these are for Guyanese children, and this should be across the board as far as I'm concerned. As Kati mentioned, there are many people who are struggling to send their kids to private schools. But I think we need to learn from when we look at Singapore, and I think it was about 10 years ago, Singapore took a World Bank loan, and they put education first. Education was the front line. The teachers, to get into the teaching profession in Singapore, it was highly competitive and teachers were highly paid. So, and the expectations of them and the accountability of the teachers was there. It's not about giving teachers money and there's no accountability and children are falling behind and all this nonsense. No, there's serious accountability. Children must perform and they're tested properly and evaluated. So we cannot expect, you know, I remember when I returned from PAHO and I saw kids, they're dressed in their nice uniforms, but for their age and the class they're in, it's not linking to their chronological age because they're fallen behind. And those are things that we have to, we can fix them. The technology is there. The methodology is there to help these kids leapfrog and move. But we have to be serious about what it means for us as a country, and that we see the human resource is the engine of growth in a country such as ours. And so education becomes a front-end issue of the investment and to attract resources from the Sovereign Wealth Fund as we know it. So those are things that we need to have a dialogue on. And I'm not even sure that many of us understand the Sovereign Wealth Fund and how to access resources, etc., that it can be directed into certain things. So we need to move and we need to look at it very carefully. But I think education is a priority. And I want to underscore nutrition, safety of the schools, and the water and sanitation program.
On the sanitation program. And we're coming on to program time. Well, Kathy,
Dave,
closing statement. Wrap it up there. Yeah.
Okay. I was actually just going to say, and things like education and health are issues, and our border, our territorial integrity. Those are things that there should be no politics in. Whether you like it or not, tall, WPA, PNC, wherever, AFP, there's no politics in that. It is moving the country forward, you know, and we have to get that kind of
be a political football.
Yes. Kathy, your closing thoughts?
You know, I think we've had an interesting discussion. What worries me the most is that I'm not seeing Guyanese today feeling free enough to speak out. In a kind of a way, I remember when we were in government that, you know, it was a beautiful time in the sense that people felt free to criticize, to air their concerns. And that is one thing that I think we brought to the table, in addition to many other things. What worries me today is that there's a lot of lack of information, a lot of pain and unnecessary suffering, a lot of injustices that is not being shared publicly. And I say to people, the technology allows you to take a picture, to record it, to put it on Facebook, to tell that story. And we cannot get to the stage where everybody is so scared of being victimized that we sit down and we put up things. We have to push the government to provide internet. We have to push them to make sure that they're going to deal with these issues we've discussed today. We have to push them to make sure that they give more to every student. And here we're talking about the devices, the internet, the workbooks, whatever it is. Support for teachers. Teachers have not had an increase in more than 2 years now. There are other sectors, other industries that have been losing money for decades that have gotten cash, right? And our teachers and our nurses that are keeping this country going right now, holding it together, have gotten nothing. That cannot be right. And it cannot be seen as, well, I only gonna say something if I in favor of the government. Whether you're in favor of the government or not, every Guyanese should stand up and say, look after our teachers, look after our nurses, please. Because more than ever, we need them now. That's my closing remarks. Be strong, Guyana.
Richard, your closing remarks?
Look, I believe that the education crash grant, as I said before, is a misnomer. It should be a children's grant, but I think it requires more money. We need to see the prioritization of education in a different way, that families need to understand, we are taxpayers, how this investment is going to go. And we need to ensure that strive as far as possible for digital literacy in the country. And I agree with Kathy that the government should ensure that our kids have access to the digital platform for learning as a priority. And the families should not be required to pay for it. If it's one of the first things that we should do as a country, taking money from the Sovereign Wealth Fund, is to ensure that our kids across the country would have access to the digital platform for learning. At least let us ensure that that happens, and ensure that there is good nutrition in all of our schools, because that is important. And don't forget, because of COVID, and I know they've borrowed some money for water and sanitation, but, we need to remember too, before I forget, the amount of money that parents are spending out of pocket for extra lessons, and the poor have no money to spend. So even if they got this 1,900, the 1.5 a month cannot even help them to match up with some of the families who have to pay extra money for extra lessons for the children who are doing CXC. So you're not closing the divide, you're widening the divide. So let us try to close the divide by giving a larger cash grant, giving more money to education, so that our children can be more productive and that we can use knowledge for economic development.
Richard Van West Charles, Central Executive Member of the People's National Congress and expert on the issues that he has been speaking about. Kathy Hughes, former minister in the coalition government, executive member of the Alliance for Change, and an expert on what she has been talking about. I want to thank you all very much for coming on tonight and shedding very important light on these subjects that we've been talking about. And of course, as I always say, this is just part of a larger discussion. So I'll be calling on you guys again to continue discussion. Thanks you much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. And to you, the audience, I want to say thank you much. Mr. Morgan from number 51, 52, 53, hosted us there last Sunday. We had a wonderful meeting at 1953. Morgan, I'm hailing you up. Maria, Yvonne McPherson, all of you who have been faithful troopers, not just of Politics 101, but of all these shows on the various platforms. I want to say, give thanks to you, because without you, there is no program. I hope that tonight's discussion has empowered you a little bit more, so that we can continue this journey of freeing ourselves from the shackles that are being imposed on us. Emancipation is coming, and it's a time of freeing up ourselves. Thank you. Thank you all again. for staying with me for an hour and a half. It's a long time. It's a long time, but you have stayed with us and we are staying with you. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy whatever there is to enjoy. But remember, the struggle continues. The struggle is permanent because freedom is a process. Is a process. Emancipation is a process. And good night. See you all next Tuesday. Again.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.